It was impossible at 9 to understand the reach of April's blessing. The terrible, heartbreaking circumstance that brought her to us was an impossible juxtaposition to the completely open, happy way in which she accepted our embrace, as if we were her closest cousins. We knew she didn't. A spoken word, even for 7, 8, or 9-year-old children, was burdened with a double meaning. We each played our parts. The natural way that my mother had of taking this child, and for as long as we were needed, pulling her into our family, was probably learned from her mother, also the wife of a Navy pilot. Wherever she learned it, Mother taught us the way all real lessons are taught, by simply doing it. When you're needed, you step up. When you don't step up reluctantly or self-important. I was blessed to learn this lesson at 9. I've needed it over the last 48 years, been a little longer now. For in this life, I have been my mother. Sadly, I have been April. Those ways that we weave each other is odd. April, who I've not seen, she was 2 at the time, I've not seen since, is a part of my story and a part of my tapestry. We brought her into our lives, and she never really left. We wove her in, and she became part. I'd like to think somewhere that we're part of April's tapestry as well, although at 2 she undoubtedly does remember us. The stories in here are always about grief and about hardship. They're also about some of the times where having people in your lives who are important to you can be joyful. The book is not a political book in any sense of the word, but this story takes place in a political setting. This is in 2004. The Iowa caucuses take place on a Monday evening. It makes the Monday important and useless at the same time. Basically, you've done all that you can do, and the day is often spent making certain that your supporters will turn out that night. We had a morning of television scheduled in which we would do that reminding. John got up first, showered, and left for a series of interviews. My first appearance would be on the Today Show. They'd set up a studio in the hotel I was in, an interview with Campbell Brown. Now, I don't know if you know who Campbell Brown is, but she is an extraordinarily beautiful anchor on NBC. I showered and dressed. I'd lost my hairbrush the previous day. We stopped at a drugstore, and from a meager selection, I picked the best replacement. I have to tell you, I actually love Iowa. If you're from North Carolina, you'd love Iowa too. People are really warm and down to earth, completely natural. The landscape is more beautiful than you think it's going to be. It really is extraordinarily beautiful. You know, the waving corn, and it's actually more mountainous than you imagine. Do not go to Iowa to shop. It is not a place to shop, not even for a brush. So I hurriedly picked out the best replacement. Now I was standing in front of the mirror at the Hotel Fort Des Moines, drying my hair and trying to style it with my new brush. I reached under the back of my head and I wrapped my damp hair around the brush and held it there while I aimed the dryer at the brush. And then, as I've done 1,000 times, I tried to pull the brush away. Now this is a crowd mostly women, and women know exactly what happens next. I have to tell you, when they're in the crowd, they look at you blankly, they have no idea what happens next. And of course, you know, it wouldn't come. I put the dryer down and I tried to work the hair loose from the brush with my fingers, but the brush was in the back of my head. You all had this problem and can't see which way you're supposed to pull. 5 minutes, then 10, and the brush was still there. I was alone and downstairs. I called Jennifer Palmieri, who was the press secretary, but of course, knowing that she could fix it, but she, of course, had gone to his interviews and turned off her phone while the interviews were going on. So I called the only person I knew who was in the hotel, who was Miles Lackey, who's actually from Shelby. And he was John's chief of staff, and he was in his room. Hearing the alarm in my voice, he hurried down to my room. Now, Miles grew up with only boys, and he was pretty close to bald, and he had no idea how to help. So he pulled and he wrestled with the brush, but it did no good. Then I had another try, and while I was doing that, he would BlackBerry panic to Jennifer, "How in the world do I fix this?" I clearly could not go on television with a hairbrush sticking from the back of my head. And it was, I mean, it was like the focus here and the handle is sticking out this way. There's no way to hide this. Finally, he spotted a fork that was left over from a meal somebody had eaten the previous night in the room, and be glad to hear they did wash it. And then he used the tines to pry the hair loose from the hairbrush, and every yank hurt, but of course every yank was bliss. Finally, it was out. I combed my still damp hair. Of course, it's still wet, it didn't dry. And with John's comb, and hurried downstairs. With only a minute to spare, I fell into a seat opposite the, remember, incredibly beautiful Campbell Brown. I have no idea what I said or how I looked. I only know that I was no longer wearing a hairbrush. Of course, whether it's Miles or April or any of the people we come in contact with, we have an opportunity. Each of us have an opportunity to weave those into our stories. Sometimes it's hard for people. They think, well, I'm too shy to do that. And there are people who are shy, but this is a learned skill. This isn't something you're born with. It's an ability that my mother taught me through April, and I learned through being put in situations where I had to stick my hand out. And what it's meant is when bad things happen to me, I wasn't alone. And my ability to be open to people has meant that people see me that way. So when my breast cancer was announced in 2004, I received 65,000 emails. I received 30,000 pieces of snail mail. People reaching out to tell me, as I signed some books earlier, there were people in that line who'd sent me snail mail then, or sent me emails, people who had reached out because I was open to include them in my life. And what that's meant is that people say you're strong. I'm not. You're strong. And you gave me ability to stand up when I otherwise couldn't. You're the crutch I've leaned on in bad times. And this book is, it's part of thank you note to all those people who are part of my support system. It's also made part of the instruction book for how it is you weave these people in. You can't wait until you need them. It's too late then. You have to start weaving them in. You have to be open to that earlier in your life to make certain that they're there at the times that you need them. This book has all the different places I found them. I did find them at the grocery store, in the mailman, in the PTA, and the sides of soccer fields. But I also found them on the internet, and I found them in town halls across the country, and I found them as the last chapter, new chapter in this book tells you, found them in book readings all across America. One of them actually right here in Charlotte. Well, thank you for being part of my tapestry. I'll answer time because they put me on such a short leash to answer a couple of questions. I'm happy to do that, and then I'll be happy to sign books too. I want to tell you though that if you, because I've got a little time to do that, if you line up to sign books, do not use that time just to stand there. There's someone in front of you don't know who could be part of your tapestry, someone behind you. When I tell people to do this, I'll often find out that somebody actually has a great connection to them. Last night in Columbia, South Carolina, a woman said that her granddaughter was taught by a woman behind her in line, but there was no for her to have known that, except that they did what I told them to do, and they added people to their own tapestries while standing. So don't waste that time. Don't waste any of the time you have. I can't tell you how important it's been to me that I did this. Some of the worst things in life have happened to me. All right, now it's your turn to ask a couple of questions if I can. Yes, ma'am. How's my health now? That's an easy one. Actually, I do have cancer in my bones. It hasn't metastasized, but the truth of the matter is that I don't have any symptoms, which is a good sign. I take medication that has very little side effects. I'm trying to avoid one big side effect of dying, so I'm willing to accept little side effects. And I have lots of energy. Honestly, I'm taking better care of myself now than I did before. If you didn't know I was sick, you wouldn't know I was sick. Thank you very much. Thanks. Yes, ma'am.
A lot of people...
She has a microphone in case other people want to hear the question.
I think a lot of people question John running for the presidency with your diagnosis, and I just wondered how he considered you when he made that decision, and your health and everything, and how the decision was made, because it seems that he would have waited until you were well and over your situation.
I'm not going to get well. I'm not. That's the truth. And I'm as well as I'm going to get. And so the decision, and this is what the last, I'd actually written last chapter before the diagnosis, before we found out that it metastasized. I had to rewrite that chapter. And it's a lot about that. That chapter discusses this. This was my decision. And honestly, as I go across the country, there's a lot of criticism afterwards about the decision to move on, as if John was forcing me to do that. Nothing could be further from the truth. And people who have been in my situation have been uniformly supportive of the decision. I have a choice to go put my head under the covers and decide I'm just going to wait to die, or I can live as fully as I possibly can. And is it 2 years? Is it 10? Is it 20? I have no idea. But I do know that every day that I give up to cancer, I might as well have died that day. And every day I live fully is like hitting it in the face, saying, see, I'm still here. You haven't taken me down yet.